In today's discussion on satisfying real market needs, we're going to be transitioning from the prior lecture on identifying and exploring those needs, and we really aim to answer a number of questions that's related to how to launch the product successfully and how to identify and serve market segments. We're going to talk about why customers would need the product, what's the best way to deliver on their needs and wants, what features and functions do we want to incorporate, how to evaluate and consider competitors both currently and in the future, and we'll talk a bit about pricing as well. So the economic feasibility is a central question that we want to address, and we want to make sure that we're not over-designing the product. While there may be individuals out there that will buy something at any price, there are likely not going to be enough of them for the products and services that most entrepreneurs are bringing to market. And for that reason, we also believe that typically more features are better, but we may find that that is indeed a bit of a misnomer and that it is perhaps too complicated, perhaps overly designed, perhaps too expensive. So we want to be aware of all of those issues. Production costs are certainly central to that, and we want to be sure that we may address a niche market, but that there are enough people in the market that we can achieve the revenue goals that we set forth. And we also want to recognize that with high development cost and over-designed products may result in high price points and low demand, and that might be an unprofitable opportunity. So we want to be aware and beware of those issues. So one of the companies that we talked about previously was Tesla, and when you look at the electric vehicle market, and this would be the 100% electric vehicle market, when this was brought to market around 2009, it was a $109,000 price point. It was, again, positioned as a competitor to the Porsches and the Ferraris and the Lamborghinis, and so $109,000 we may believe to be expensive. And while expensive for a vehicle, it may not necessarily be expensive versus the category and the niche of the market that they are competing within. So in that context, we want to be aware and not so much look at a price point and say, oh, that feels high or oh, that feels low. We want to take it and measure and in reference to the competition within which we are looking to compete within. A very different market that is being pursued was the Chevy Volt market. And so with this vehicle, what we're looking at here is a price point of approximately $40,000. The $33,000 that you see is after a number of rebates and incentives and tax credits, but we'll call this nominally in the 30s with a price point. And for something that is designed as a four-door passenger vehicle, that is a little bit on the expensive side perhaps, but when you are looking at something that is, again, in the electric market, it's certainly much more affordable than the Tesla, and is something that is, again, positioned for a different market, for a different purpose. And what we can also see is some design differences. The photos you see in the bottom are geared towards something that was designed at the concept phase, and what we see that eventually made its way to market, while perhaps being similar underneath the hood, is a bit different in the appearance, is a bit more conservative, is a bit more less exotic or less aggressive, and it might suggest that they're perhaps targeting a different market, perhaps an older market, perhaps a market that is more interested in something that is a little less aggressive in the design. So again, aesthetics certainly play a role as well in design and in the markets that we're going after. Yet another all-electric vehicle is Jem Chrysler company, and these are geared towards individuals that may have a very different purpose in what they're doing with their electric vehicle. These are typically street legal in the U.S.,